Hi, this is Support Local Scene here with G. Edward Griffin, legendary author. And Mr. Griffin, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Griffin, there's a question that's kind of floating out in the air about the 99-year lease on the Federal Reserve, which is supposedly coming up in 2013. Can you speak on that? Does it exist? And is there a chance to do something about it?
Well, my understanding is that the 99-year lease was in the original charter to the Fed, but that's been changed. That was reworked, and now it's has no termination date. It can be terminated by Congress, which of course is what we want to see happen.
Right.
But unless Congress takes some action, it's just an indefinite period of time.
Right.
So the 99-year lease no longer applies.
I understand. With respect to the Federal Reserve then, what are your suggestions for people out there who are looking into this information and are worried about the collapse of the dollar? Any tips on how to protect themselves and or how to attack the Fed, as it were?
Well, that's really a big topic, isn't it? And I know we don't have time to go into a lot of detail, but in general, people have to protect themselves in the short term before they can think about the long term. But in that process, many people forget the long term completely. By that I mean the short term is relatively easy to understand. The value of all fiat currencies, the US dollar, the Canadian dollar, all of the great nations of the world have fiat currencies, which means they're not backed by anything of tangible value. They're backed by the power to tax the citizens, basically. And so there's no restraint on the part of the banks or the politicians to limit the supply of money. Consequently, the supply of money constantly is increasing to cover up the fact that the governmental policies are failing. Because if they didn't expand the money supply, it would be obvious that everything had failed. So any country that has fiat currency, which is all of them today, is in real big trouble as this currency gradually disappears in value. So anybody that has savings in terms of fiat currencies is silly if they leave them there. If you want to protect yourself on the short term, you've got to get away from fiat currencies. That means bank accounts, CDs, insurance policies that are denominated in terms of money of the national currency, anything like that. And the people that are counting on those to carry them through their old age, their retirement and so forth, they're going to be terribly disappointed when that happens, because when they reach for it, it'll be gone. It'll be not worth anything. We've seen that happen many, many times before in history. So the short-term answer is to get out of currencies. If you have anything in the way of savings, put them into tangible items of some kind. For the average person who doesn't have any great skills in manufacturing or marketing or trading, it leaves gold and silver as the obvious one, and most people prefer that. And so that is what I do. What little I have left over at the end of the month or the year, if I have anything, I'll put it into gold and or silver. And that's not without risk, of course, because you have to worry about where you put the gold and silver. Somebody might steal it from you. Mm-hmm. And if you put it in a safety deposit box in the bank, you worry about the fact that the government will come and lock all the safety deposit box or take them all. If you put them in a professional vault someplace that will guard it for you, you have to worry about the fact that they might not be honest. They may not keep your gold there. So there are problems with all of these. But the most risky of all of the decisions, in my view, the most risky of all is to leave your savings in terms of currencies. So that's the short-term answer. The long-term answer is that even that will not work if we don't restore the system. If the system isn't restored to a sound monetary base where money is backed by gold or silver, then even the gold and silver we might have won't help us, because the governments will become desperate and they'll confiscate the gold.
And they've done it before.
They've done it before. Or even if they don't, they'll deteriorate into totalitarian systems. People will be hungry and they'll say, save us, give us a place to sleep, give us food. And the governments will be happy to do that in return for their freedom. They'll just be a complete slave society. And under those conditions, having gold or silver isn't going to help you. So the long-term answer is just as important as the short term. We've got to restore the system. We've got to educate our fellow citizens. We've got to get real statesmen into political office, not just these tin horn politicians that are just working for the short term, you know, do whatever they can to get reelected and to heck about the future. So we've got to restore the system. So it's not an easy path, but it can be done. And actually we're making progress in that direction as we speak. And thanks to you, maybe this will help a little bit.
Well, and thanks to your 50 years of work on this issue, Mr. Griffin, we certainly have a better shot than we would have. Relating to that, you have been studying this for years, and I know there are people who are studying issues involving globalism and communitarianism and, say, the quote-unquote New World Order, which is theoretically the Old World Order, rebranding itself. Mm-hmm. With respect to this, you've obviously shared insights with many people and seen many people share insights. Can you tell me what some of the most populist topics are that resonate with the most people to get them active and engaged and at least interested in looking into this subject matter?
Yes, I think the hottest button of them all is their money. People who don't seem to be interested in anything else, the educational system, what's happening overseas, foreign policy, and who cares, but hey, what's happening to my purchasing power and my money? They show a great interest in that. So, and they should. It's not that they shouldn't, it's just that these other issues are perhaps just as important, but their interest is totally economic. So that's one of them. And the other one is what's happening to their environment. And I don't mean, you know, global warming, because I believe that's a hoax, to tell you the truth. But what's happening to their food supply? What's happening to these chemtrails? These people are supposedly trying to change the weather, supposedly to stop global warming, which doesn't even exist. And they're spraying this stuff around. And when that stuff comes down, we breathe it. People are getting sick. It's going into the soil. It's going into our plants. And the plants are picking it up. And it's a serious problem. They put toxic substances into our water supply, like fluorides, supposedly to help tooth decay among little kids. And it's a hoax. The fluorides are very toxic. They don't really help in a dental scene at all. And when people wake up to the fact that they're being poisoned and they can't escape it because it's everywhere, that's another hot button. And they should be concerned about that too. So there are certain things, and I'm glad you brought that up, because quite often, if you're trying to figure out how to talk to someone who seems to be rather apathetic about what's going on, if you can find a hot button like that, you're in.
I understand. And Mr. Griffin, thank you for the answer. You've also taken the initiative to form a group called Freedom Force. I want you to, if you don't mind, elaborate a bit on that, because it's a pioneering effort, and Freedom Force is certainly something that we can all sort of see we need today. I even speak with people casually who recognize that our rights are being taken away but feel a little disempowered by the concept. They're okay with admitting it, which is not necessarily a good thing when they're not especially engaged into doing something about it or compelled to. So can you tell us a bit about Freedom Force?
Yeah, just a brief introduction to it. It's a big topic, and but Freedom Force is an organization, but it's not a typical organization. And most organizations are organized pyramidally. You know, the pyramid, the leadership at the top, and then the middle management and all the rank and file that do all the work at the bottom. Military organizations, corporations, governments, almost everything is pyramidal. Freedom Force is just the opposite. It's what you would call holographic. Hologram, you could take one of those holographic plates and take scissors and cut it in half, hold it up to the light, and you've got two images exactly the same. Smaller, but they're the same. You cut those in half and those in half. No matter how small you go, each piece has the whole image in it. And that's what Freedom Force is, for a reason which I'll get to in a moment. It's because we know that Freedom Force is taking on the big totalitarian groups in the world. And they're not going to like us. They don't like us already. And if we were pyramidal, all they got to do is just knock off the head, you know, get rid of the leader. And that doesn't necessarily mean shoot him. It could be just demonize him in the press and convince everybody that he's a child molester or whatever they want to do. Most people would believe whatever they say. So we knew that that would be the case. So we organized this holographic structure so they can get rid of everybody but one person. And that one person has the whole message and the whole structure, everything. So that tells you the structure, doesn't tell you what it is. Freedom Force is that kind of an organization which is dedicated to recapturing control of the various nations. We have people in what, about 65 countries now. This problem of collectivism growing and dominating is happening all over the world, and people feel the same need to take back their country. And we know that the way you take back a country is not with guns and bayonets. We haven't lost our countries that way. We lost our countries because people with an alien ideology have moved into our organizations and taken us over from within. They didn't attack us from the outside. They moved into our political parties, into our educational systems, into our church organizations, our labor unions, you know, the media centers, the effect the news we get. That's how they've taken the country. Those are the power centers of society. And so Freedom Force International is dedicated to a strategy for recapturing our system, exactly the way we lost it, from the inside. Freedom Force International. And the website is freedomforceinternational.org.
Mr. Griffin, I want to thank you for bringing your words of freedom and the idea of Freedom Force and your ideas to Toronto. Thank you so much for your time,
thanks,
sir.
It's a pleasure.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Bye. Awesome.
Thank you again,
Okay,
Mr.
thank
Griffin.
you.
Appreciate it.